The colony's ship Endurance had been falling apart for 3 days when Captain Marcus Webb made the call to evacuate. The engines were dead, life support was failing, and the nearest habitable planet was a world that no human had ever set foot on. The alien database called it Versh 7, a planet covered in thick forests and rocky highlands. It was not ideal, but it was their only chance. Marcus stood on the bridge and watched the planet grow larger through the cracked viewport. Behind him, his crew worked in silence. They all knew what was coming. They would have to abandon the ship and survive on an unknown world until rescue arrived, if rescue arrived at all. "How long until we reach orbit?" Marcus asked. Lieutenant Anna Kowalski checked her console. 12 hours, Captain. Maybe less if we push what's left of the thrusters." "Push them," Marcus said. "We don't have time to be gentle." The Endurance Asterisk had been carrying 247 colonists to a new world when the asteroid struck. It had come out of nowhere, a chunk of rock that the sensors had missed until it was too late. The impact had killed 30 people instantly and damaged the ship beyond repair. Now they were limping toward a planet that might kill the rest of them. Marcus turned to face his crew. There were 8 of them on the bridge, the last of the ship's officers. The rest of the colonists were in the cargo bays, gathered around the emergency shuttles that would carry them to the surface. "Listen up," Marcus said. "We're going to make it. We've survived worse than this. When we land, we stick together. We find water, we find shelter, and we wait for rescue. The distress beacon is still working. Someone will come for us." No one answered. They all knew that the nearest human settlement was months away at best. They were alone in this part of the galaxy, surrounded by alien species who had never shown much interest in helping humans. The hours passed slowly. Marcus stayed on the bridge, watching the planet rotate beneath them. Versh 7 was beautiful in a harsh way. The forests were a deep blue-green, and the mountains were sharp and jagged like broken teeth. Rivers cut through the landscape, silver threads that glittered in the light of the system's sun. But there was something else, something that made Marcus uneasy. The alien database had included a warning about Versh 7. The planet was home to predators, large, fast, and hungry predators that hunted in packs. The database had not given many details, but it had been clear about one thing: the predators were dangerous. "Captain," Anna said, breaking the silence, "we're entering orbit. All shuttles are ready for launch." Marcus nodded. "Start the evacuation. Get everyone on the ground before this ship falls apart around us." The shuttles launched one by one, dropping toward the planet like seeds falling from a dying tree. Marcus was on the last one, standing at the back of the crowded compartment and watching through the small window as the asterisk Endurance grew smaller and smaller behind them. The ship exploded when they were halfway to the surface. There was no sound in the vacuum of space, but Marcus saw the flash of light as the remaining fuel ignited. The Endurance came apart in a silent bloom of fire and debris. "There goes our home," someone muttered. Marcus said nothing. The ship was gone. All that mattered now was survival. The shuttles landed in a wide valley between 2 mountain ranges. The air was breathable, if a bit thin, and the gravity was slightly heavier than Earth normal. Marcus stepped out onto the blue-green grass and looked around at the world that would be their home for the foreseeable future. The colonists gathered around him, 217 people who were looking to him for guidance. They were farmers and engineers, doctors and teachers, ordinary people who had signed up for a new life on a distant colony world. None of them had expected this. "We need to set up camp," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "We need water, fire, and shelter. Teams of 10 spread out and search the area. Report back in 2 hours." The colonists moved to obey. Marcus had trained them well during the long voyage, running drills and simulations to prepare them for emergencies. They knew how to work together, how to survive. He just hoped it would be enough. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the colony's chief medical officer, approached him. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she had been a soldier before she became a doctor. Marcus trusted her more than almost anyone else. "The wounded are stable," Elena said, "but we lost 6 more during the descent. The shuttles weren't designed for combat landings." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. 211 people left. "Do what you can for the survivors. We'll hold a memorial when we have time." Elena nodded and walked away. Marcus stood alone for a moment, looking up at the sky where the Endurance had died. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful, but Marcus felt only cold. The first night on Verge 7 was quiet. The colonists built fires and huddled together for warmth. They ate emergency rations from the shuttles and talked in low voices about what would happen next. Some of them cried. Some of them prayed. Most of them just sat in silence, too tired and too scared to do anything else. Marcus walked the perimeter of the camp, checking the guards he had posted. They were armed with the few weapons they had managed to save from the ship, mostly hunting rifles and a handful of energy pistols. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. "Captain," said James Okonkwo, one of the younger colonists. He was standing at the edge of the firelight, staring out into the darkness. "Did you hear that?" Marcus stopped and listened. At first there was nothing but the wind in the trees and the crackling of the fires. Then he heard it, a sound like rocks grinding together, low and rhythmic. It was coming from the forest. "Wake the others," Marcus said quietly. "Everyone up now." The colonists scrambled to their feet as the sound grew louder. Marcus moved to the edge of the camp and raised his rifle, peering into the darkness. He could see movement in the trees, shapes that were too big to be anything harmless. Then the predators emerged. They were massive, each one the size of a small car. Their bodies were covered in thick gray hide, and their legs were long and powerful. Their faces were flat and eyeless, but they had mouths full of teeth like broken glass. And there were dozens of them, maybe more, flowing out of the forest like a wave of death. "Run," Marcus breathed, then he shouted it, "Run!" The colonists fled. They grabbed what they could carry and ran toward the mountains, their feet pounding against the alien grass. The predators followed, their strange grinding sound filling the air as they gave chase. Marcus ran with them, his heart hammering in his chest. The predators were fast, faster than anything he had ever seen. But humans were fast too. Humans had been running from predators since the dawn of time. It was written into their DNA, the ancient instinct to flee, to survive, to keep moving no matter what. The race for survival had begun. The colonists ran through the night. They did not stop, could not stop, because the predators were always behind them. Marcus pushed his people forward, shouting encouragement and commands as they scrambled over rocks and through streams. The young helped the old. The strong carried the weak. No one was left behind. By dawn, they had reached the foothills of the mountains. The predators had fallen back, unwilling or unable to follow them into the rocky terrain. Marcus called a halt and let his people rest, their bodies shaking with exhaustion and fear. They had survived the first night, but Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. The second day on Verge 7 was harder than the first. The colonists were exhausted and scared, and the mountains were steep and unforgiving. Marcus led them higher, searching for a place where they could make a stand. The predators would come again, he was certain of that. They needed to be ready. Dr. Vasquez walked beside him, her medical bag slung over her shoulder. "We lost 8 more during the night," she said quietly. "Heart attacks mostly. The elderly couldn't handle the stress of the run." 203 left, Marcus said. He had been keeping count. Every death was a weight on his soul, but he couldn't afford to mourn. Not yet. "The children are holding up well," Elena said. "Kids are resilient. It's the adults who are falling apart." Marcus nodded. He had noticed the same thing. The children ran with energy and determination while their parents stumbled and wheezed. It was a grim irony. The youngest and the fittest would survive. The rest would fall. They found a cave system near the top of a ridge, a network of tunnels that cut deep into the mountain. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. The predators would not be able to enter in force. "This is it," Marcus said. "This is where we make our stand." The colonists set to work immediately. They gathered rocks and built barricades at the cave entrance. They explored the tunnels and found underground streams where they could get fresh water. They rationed their food and calculated how long they could hold out. Marcus stood at the cave entrance and looked out over the valley below. The predators were gathering at the base of the mountain, dozens of gray shapes moving through the blue-green trees. They were patient, these creatures. They would wait. "They're not giving up," said James, who had become Marcus's unofficial second-in-command. "Neither are we," Marcus replied. That night the predators attacked. They came up the mountain in a wave, their grinding sound echoing off the rocks. The colonists met them with gunfire and stones, fighting for every meter of ground. The battle lasted for hours, and when it was over, the mountainside was littered with predator bodies. But the colonists had lost 12 more people, 191 left. "We can't keep this up," Alina said as she bandaged a wounded colonist. "We're running out of ammunition, and we're running out of people." Marcus knew she was right. They needed a new plan. They couldn't just sit in the cave and wait to die. "We need to move," he said. "We need to find somewhere the predators can't follow us." James frowned. "Where? They're everywhere." Marcus thought about the terrain he had seen from the air, the mountains, the forests, the rivers. There had been something else too, something he had almost forgotten. A vast plain on the other side of the mountain range, covered in tall grass and dotted with strange rock formations. The alien database had mentioned it briefly. The predators did not hunt there. "The plains," Marcus said. "We need to reach the plains." The journey would be brutal. They would have to cross the mountains on foot, traveling for days through rough terrain with the predators at their heels. Many of them would die, but it was their only chance. Marcus gathered the colonists and explained the plan. Some of them protested, some of them cried, but in the end they all agreed. They would run. They set out at dawn, leaving the cave behind. The predators followed immediately, flowing up the mountain like water. The colonists ran, their feet pounding against the rocky ground, their lungs burning in the thin air. Marcus ran at the front of the group, setting the pace. He had been a marathon runner back on Earth before he joined the colonial service. He knew how to manage his energy, how to push through the pain. He would lead his people to safety, or he would die trying. The days blurred together. Running, resting, running again. The predators never stopped, never slowed down. They were always there, just behind, waiting for someone to fall. And people did fall. The weak, the injured, the ones who simply couldn't keep up. Marcus wanted to go back for them, but he knew he couldn't. Every second he wasted was a second the predators could use to catch up. He had to keep moving. He had to save as many people as he could. By the fourth day, they had crossed the mountains. The plains stretched out before them, endless and golden under the alien sun. The colonists stumbled down the last slope and collapsed onto the soft grass, gasping for breath. Behind them, the predators stopped at the edge of the mountains. They did not follow. Something about the plains kept them away. Marcus counted heads. 142 people left. They had lost nearly half their number in the crossing. But they were alive. They had made it. The weeks that followed were difficult but manageable. The colonists set up a permanent camp on the plains, building shelters from the tall grass and stone. They found food in the form of edible plants and small animals that lived in burrows beneath the ground. They survived. Marcus spent his days organizing work parties and planning for the future. The distress beacon was still transmitting, and he had to believe that someone would come for them eventually. Until then, they would make a life on this strange world. Alina approached him one evening as he sat by the fire. "I've been doing some research," she said, sitting down beside him. "The predators, the ones that chased us, I think I know why they didn't follow us onto the plains." "Why?" Marcus asked. "The grass," Alina said. "It releases a chemical compound that's toxic to them. They can't survive here. That's why the database said they didn't hunt on the plains." Marcus looked out at the golden grass swaying in the wind. It had saved them. This simple plant had saved their lives. "We got lucky," he said. Alina shook her head. "It wasn't luck, Captain, it was you. You kept us together, you kept us running. Without you, we would all be dead." Marcus didn't know what to say. He had just done what needed to be done. He had run, and his people had run with him. "We're survivors," he said finally. "All of us, that's what humans do, we survive." 3 months after they had crash-landed on Verge 7, a ship appeared in the sky. It was a rescue vessel, sent from the nearest human colony after receiving their distress signal. The colonists gathered to watch it descend, their faces filled with hope and relief. Marcus stood at the front of the crowd watching the ship land. They had made it. They had survived. The rescue ship's captain was a woman named Rodriguez. She stepped off the shuttle and looked around at the colonists with wide eyes. "We expected to find wreckage," she said. "We didn't expect to find survivors." "We're tougher than we look," Marcus replied. Rodriguez shook her head in amazement. "How did you do it? The database says this planet is one of the most dangerous in the sector. The predators alone should have killed you all." Marcus turned and looked back at his people. 142 colonists, tired and dirty but alive. They had run across an entire continent to escape death. They had refused to give up. "We outran them," Marcus said. "It's what humans do." The colonists boarded the rescue ship one by one. Some of them looked back at the plains, at the world that had tried to kill them and failed. They would never forget this place. They would never forget what they had done. Marcus was the last to board. He stood at the top of the ramp and took one final look at Verge 7. The golden grass stretched to the horizon, beautiful and deadly. "Goodbye," he whispered. Then he turned and walked into the ship. The rescue vessel lifted off and climbed into the sky. Verge 7 grew smaller and smaller beneath them, until it was just another dot among the stars. In the passenger bay, the colonists sat in silence. They were going home, or at least to somewhere safe. The nightmare was over. Marcus sat by a window and watched the stars drift by. He thought about everything they had lost, all the people who had died so that others could live. He would carry that weight for the rest of his life. But he also felt something else: pride. His people had faced impossible odds and survived. They had proven that humans were not prey, that they could not be hunted to extinction. They had run, and they had won. James sat down beside him. "What happens now, Captain?" Marcus thought about the question. They would return to human space. They would tell their story, and people would listen. People would learn. "Now we rest," Marcus said. "And then we start again. That's what humans do. We never stop, we never give up. We just keep running." James nodded and leaned back in his seat. Outside the window, the stars burned bright and cold. Somewhere far behind them, on a planet covered in golden grass, the predators waited. They had learned a lesson that day, a lesson that would spread throughout the galaxy. Humans were not easy prey. Humans were survivors. And when the predators came for them, humans ran, not out of fear but out of strength. They ran until they found safety. They ran until they won. The rescue ship carried the colonists home, crossing the vast distances of space. They arrived at their destination 3 weeks later, a colony world called New Geneva. The colonists stepped off the ship and breathed the familiar air of a human settlement. Marcus stayed behind for a moment, looking at the faces of his people. They were changed. They were harder now, tempered by fire and blood, but they were also stronger. They had proven something on Verge 7, something that would stay with them forever. Humans could survive anything. Humans could outrun anything. Speed and endurance, the gifts of their ancient ancestors, had carried them through the darkness and into the light. As Marcus finally stepped off the ship, he felt the sun on his face. He was alive. His people were alive. And that was enough. The story of the Versh 7 survivors spread across human space like wildfire. It became a legend, a tale told around campfires and in schools. The humans who had outrun the predator horde, who had crossed mountains and plains to reach safety. Other species heard the story too. They had always underestimated humans, viewing them as soft and weak compared to the more physically imposing races of the galaxy. But Versh 7 changed that perception. Humans were survivors. Humans were relentless. Humans would run until their hearts gave out, and then they would run some more. The Galactic Confederation, a loose alliance of spacefaring species, took notice. They had been reluctant to admit humans into their ranks, viewing them as too young and too aggressive. But the Versh 7 incident changed their minds. A delegation arrived on New Geneva to meet with the survivors. They were tall, thin beings with multiple limbs and compound eyes. Their translator devices rendered their words in halting English. "We wish to understand," the lead delegate said, "how your species survived on Versh 7. Our analysis indicates that survival was statistically impossible." Marcus had been chosen to speak for the colonists. He stood before the alien delegation and felt no fear. He had faced predators. He had watched friends die. These beings, strange as they were, did not frighten him. "We ran," Marcus said simply. The delegate tilted its head. "Ran? You mean you fled? Is that not a sign of weakness?" Marcus shook his head. "Running is not weakness. Running is survival. Our ancestors ran across the plains of our homeworld for millions of years. They ran from predators, they ran toward prey, they ran until their enemies collapsed from exhaustion. It's in our blood." The delegate processed this information. "Your species evolved as pursuit predators. You did not fight the Versh 7 creatures. You outlasted them." "That's right," Marcus said. "We kept moving, we kept going. And when we found a place where the predators couldn't follow, we stopped. We survived." The delegation was silent for a long moment. Then the lead delegate spoke again. "Your species is more formidable than we realized. The Galactic Confederation would like to extend an invitation. We wish you to join us as full members." Marcus felt a surge of emotion that he couldn't quite name. Pride, perhaps, or vindication. Humans had been trying to join the Confederation for decades, and they had always been rejected. "We accept," Marcus said, "and we thank you for the honor." The delegate nodded. "We believe you will be a valuable addition to our alliance. Your species has qualities that we lack: endurance, resilience, the ability to survive where others would die." Marcus smiled. "We've had a lot of practice." The ceremony was held the next day. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to witness humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Confederation. Marcus stood with the other Versh 7 survivors, their faces solemn but proud. As the treaty was signed, Marcus looked around at the alien faces surrounding him. Some were friendly, some were curious, and some were still uncertain, but they all respected him now. They all knew what humans were capable of. Alina stood beside him, her gray hair gleaming in the light. "We did it," she murmured. "We actually did it." "We did," Marcus agreed. "All of us. Everyone who ran, everyone who kept going, everyone who refused to give up." The ceremony ended with a feast, a celebration of unity between species. Marcus ate strange foods and drank unfamiliar drinks and talked with beings he had never imagined meeting. It was surreal, like a dream that he didn't want to wake from. But eventually, the celebration ended. The aliens returned to their ships and the humans were left alone. Marcus walked to the edge of the settlement and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Versh 7 was spinning in the darkness. The predators were still hunting, still waiting for prey that would never come. He thought about the people they had lost, the ones who had died on the ship, the ones who had fallen during the run, the ones who had sacrificed themselves so that others could live. They deserved to be remembered. Marcus made a decision. He would write their names down, every single one of them. He would tell their stories. He would make sure that the galaxy knew what they had done. Because that was what humans did. They remembered, they honored, they kept going. The next morning, Marcus started writing. He worked for weeks, recording everything that had happened on Verge 7. The crash, the evacuation, the first attack, the run across the mountains, the desperate race for the planes, the survival against all odds. When he was finished, he sent the document to every news outlet in human space. The story spread even further than before, reaching corners of the galaxy that had never heard of Verge 7 or the colonists who had survived there. Humans everywhere read the account and felt a surge of pride. They shared it with their children, teaching them about endurance and survival. They talked about it in bars and workplaces, discussing what they would have done in the same situation. And the galaxy listened. Other species began to see humans differently. They were no longer the young upstarts, the aggressive newcomers who didn't know their place. They were survivors. They were fighters. They were beings who would not be beaten. Trade delegations arrived from distant worlds, seeking alliances with humanity. Military commanders requested human advisors, hoping to learn from their unique capabilities. Scientists studied human physiology, trying to understand how they could run for hours without stopping. Humanity's place in the galaxy was secured, not through weapons or technology, but through sheer determination. Marcus retired from the colonial service and settled on New Geneva with the other Verge 7 survivors. They built a community together, a place where they could live in peace and remember what they had been through. Every year on the anniversary of their rescue, they gathered to honor the dead. They read the names of everyone who had fallen, one by one. They lit candles and sang songs and told stories about the friends they had lost. And then they ran. It had become a tradition, a way of remembering what had saved them. The survivors would run together, jogging through the fields and forests of New Geneva, their feet pounding against the familiar earth. Young and old, fast and slow, they all ran. They ran for the dead and for the living. They ran to prove that they were still here, still fighting, still surviving. Marcus ran at the front of the group just as he had on Verge 7. He was older now, his hair turning gray and his joints aching, but he refused to stop. He would run until his body gave out, and then he would walk. Because that was what humans did. Years passed, decades. The Verge 7 survivors grew old and began to die, one by one. Marcus attended every funeral, speaking words of comfort and remembrance. Each loss hurt, but he understood that death was part of life. The important thing was how you lived. When Marcus finally died at the age of 92, he was surrounded by family and friends. His last words were simple. "Keep running," he said, "never stop." They buried him on a hill overlooking New Geneva with a view of the stars. His grave marker bore a simple inscription, "Captain Marcus Webb. He ran so others could live." The annual run continued without him. The children of the survivors ran now, and their children after them. The tradition passed down through generations, a living memorial to those who had outrun the predator horde on Verge 7. And the galaxy never forgot. Centuries later, a young historian named Chen researched the Verge 7 incident for her doctoral thesis. She traveled to New Geneva and visited the monument that had been built in honor of the survivors. She walked the route of the annual run and felt the wind on her face. She interviewed the descendants of the original colonists and listened to their stories. She read Marcus Webb's account and the countless other documents that had been written about the incident. She tried to understand what it had been like, to be hunted across an alien world with no hope of survival. And then she wrote her thesis. It was called The Running Species: How Humanity's Endurance Shaped Galactic Politics. It became the definitive work on the subject, required reading in universities across known space. In her conclusion, Chen wrote, "The events on Verge 7 changed the galaxy's perception of humanity forever. Before, we were seen as weak and insignificant. After, we were respected and even feared. Not because we were the strongest or the most technologically advanced, but because we simply would not quit. We ran when others would have died. We survived when survival was impossible. And in doing so, we proved that the human spirit is the most powerful force in the universe." The book was translated into dozens of alien languages. It was read by beings who had never met a human, who had only heard stories about the strange bipedal creatures from the distant planet Earth. And they all came to the same conclusion. Humans were survivors. Humans were relentless. Humans would run until the stars burned out. On Verge 7, the predators still hunted. They had never forgotten the prey that had escaped them, the soft-skinned creatures that had run across the mountains and vanished onto the plains. They waited at the edge of the golden grass, generation after generation, hoping that the humans would return. But the humans never came back. They didn't need to. They had proven their point. They had shown the galaxy what they were made of. And somewhere among the stars, in settlements and ships and stations scattered across 1,000 worlds, humans kept running. They ran for exercise and for sport and for the simple joy of movement. They ran because it was in their blood, the gift of their ancient ancestors who had survived on the plains of Earth. They ran because that was who they were. And they would never stop.